The number 85 is a rather unremarkable number, or at least it was until last year, when Oxfam, a charity in the UK that fights poverty, released a report with this staggering statistic that 85 of the richest, wealthiest people in the world have as much wealth as half of the world's poorest population combined. So that's as much wealth as 3.5 billion people. 85 is a number that we can visualize. It looks like this. 85 people would fit onto one double-decker bus in London. Now, I challenge you to visualize 3.5 billion people. We can't. We're just not wired that way. It's so far beyond the Dunbar number. And this, in a nutshell, is the best indication I can think of systemic inequality. Systemic inequality is an existential threat to our species. It is unsustainable. So, if you are one of these 85, what should you do? Well, I would say possibly that you should start by building quite thick and quite tall walls around you, just to be safe. And it's probably prudent to keep an eye on those 3.5 billion out there, just to make sure that they're not up to no good, right? And mostly, we're okay with this. I mean, a lot of us are all right with the concept of a magical white guy who lives on a cloud that sees and knows everything about us. So is it too much of a stretch to think that we might be all right with maybe a less magical white guy who lives on a cloud and sees and knows everything about us? Of course, there is no such thing as a cloud. There are only other people's computers. And when we think about them today, we think about them in the huge server farms that we have that serve us Facebook and serve us Google, right? But have you ever asked yourselves, what is it that we're farming in these server farms? Because if you do, you might quickly reach the conclusion that it's us. That we are the products that these companies and these corporations sell to their actual customers. Now, in the past, and unfortunately in some places still today, we had the practice of selling people. And we called this slavery. It was the act of selling people's bodies. I think we've reached a point where we have to ask ourselves the very uncomfortable question of what do we call the business of selling everything else about you that makes you who you are apart from your body? Because this, for the most part, is the business model of mainstream technology today, is the business model of Silicon Valley today. So some of you might say, well, if this is the case, Aral, and I know it is terrible, I agree with you. The kid is right. And if this is the case, some of you might be saying, well, why aren't these companies regulated? Well, there's a very simple reason for that. It's not just in the US. Because the very people who should be in charge of protecting us and regulating these corporations are acting like cheerleaders for these very same corporations. The current person in charge of the digital agenda in the European Commission likened those of us that care about net neutrality to the Taliban. These are the people who should be protecting our rights as citizens and as human beings. Why are they not? It's quite simple. Business is fun, right? We call these things public-private partnerships. It sounds really cool. Multi-stakeholderism. Have you guys heard of this term, right? Let's bring all the stakeholders to the table. The problem is, the size of everyone's stake is not always the same. And sometimes, some of the people you invite to the table have actually paid for the table. And we call it co-regulation. So we say to Google, hey Google, tell us, how should we regulate you on privacy? And they go, yeah, we have a few ideas about how you should do that. So we can call it all of these things, or we can call it by what it actually is, which is institutional corruption. If you haven't heard Lawrence Lessig talk about this, please watch one of his talks. It is about an economy of influence. We're not talking old school corruption, where it's like, hey, here, have some money under the table. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay. No. It is an economy of influence and influence within an economy of influence. And what we're really seeing is the transfer of power from some more traditional organizations and institutions, governmental ones, to corporate ones. And this process is already almost at its conclusion. There are trade deals, like the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP, that you might have heard of, which have investor-state dispute settlement clauses. Now, this sounds like something that would just put you to sleep, but it's really important. Because what this gives is it gives corporations the right to sue governments when governments take decisions that are in the interests of their citizens, but not in the interests of the investors of these companies. If these trade agreements are ratified and become law, it's going to be almost impossible to reverse that process. And once that's done, we will have lost democracy. We will be living in a corporatocracy. So this I see as a war. It's a war on our public sphere. It's a war on the commons. And it's a war on human rights and individual freedoms. All this really is a war on democracy itself. So that's the problem. And if I leave it here, you're going to be like, thanks, Aral. Thanks for coming to Malmo and depressing the heck out of us. Not sure you'll be back next year. So what's the solution? Because the problem isn't really difficult, and neither is the solution. Most things aren't. I'm a designer, and as a designer, my duty is to try and find the core issues, the core problems that we can solve. Most times, designs don't fail because we can't solve a problem well. It's because we're solving the wrong problem. And at its core, most things are very simple. If someone tells you that something is very complex or that you won't understand it, chances are that they have a vested interest in it appearing to be complex, because that leads to apathy. So the solution? Stronger democracy. We need to strengthen our democratic instruments. And there are places that give me hope. In Iceland, of all places, would you believe that the Pirate Party is the most popular party right now? I'm actually thinking of moving there, although half of the year it's dark. I don't know how we're going to deal with that, but it's cool. But to do this, to move ahead, we have to first get rid of institutional corruption. We need to tackle this, and it's going to be hard. We need to remove the influence of corporate finance from public decision-making. Until we do this, no technologies that we make are going to solve this problem, because this is not a technological problem, it's a social problem. And to do that, we need to move beyond our current system of capitalism. Because we think of capitalism as free markets and competition, right? Hey, what could be wrong with that? When really, capitalism today is monopoly. We're not talking about free markets or competition or everyone being on an equal footing and fighting and seeing who's the best. We're talking about huge multinational corporations that have network effects in what they've done that are so far ahead of anyone else that they cannot in any way be touched. We need to move beyond monopoly. Technology can be part of the solution, but we need to understand technology better. Today, especially the designers in the room, might think of technology with the butler analogy that Steve Krug has in his wonderful book, Don't Make Me Think. So with the butler analogy, there's us. We kind of look like a gingerbread man, sorry. And there's our mobile phone. And we tell the technology to do something, right? And it answers back and says, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And in this analogy, if there's someone spying on what we're doing, it's not great, but they're intercepting signals between two actors. Okay, not great, maybe not the worst thing ever. But what if we changed how we think about technology based on how we use technology today? What if we started seeing technology as an extension of ourselves? So what if, when I write something, a note on my phone, that's not me interacting with another object, but that's me extending my mind and myself and using this technology to do so? And if we start seeing technology in this way, what if we started changing how we draw the boundaries of the self so that it doesn't stop at the physical boundaries of our bodies, but perhaps extends to include the technologies by which we extend our bodies? In this case, think about what spying on what we're doing becomes. In this case, it becomes an intrusion of the self, an assault. And we already have a system of laws that knows how to deal with intrusions on the self. Today, it's not far-fetched to say that we are all cyborgs. We don't implant ourselves with technologies yet en masse, but we extend our biological capabilities through technologies. So perhaps it's time that we started thinking about extending person rights to the technologies by which we extend our persons. So if we do, and if we start thinking about technology in this way, it becomes very clear that it's crucial that we as individuals own and control the means by which we extend ourselves. Because to lead that one step further, it is simply to say that we as individuals should own and control ourselves. That is all technology is. You hear about data being the new oil. How horrible is that? Data is us. Data is people. Our technologies are extensions of ourselves. As Melvin Kranzberg says, technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. So the character of our technologies is hugely important. As Marshall McLuhan said, we shape our tools, and then our tools shape us. And this is where design comes into the picture. This is why design is so crucial. And when I talk about design, I don't mean aesthetics. I'm not talking about the color of a pixel or how much of a rounded corner you have on your lovely panel. I'm talking about holistic design. So let's take a look at how design is today in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley design is awesome in the short term, in the now. We create great products that empower people in the here and now. You pull up Google Maps and you get to find where you need to go and you get there. That's empowering. That's awesome. What's the cost? Google gets to know where you're going. And it adds that to all of the other things that it knows about you. Why? So that it can monetize that, so that it can raise shareholder value for its shareholders. So the cost is an erosion in our civil liberties in the future and in our human rights. This is design without ethics. And design without ethics is purely manipulation. It is not really design. It's decoration. The difference between decoration and design is that decoration perpetuates the status quo, whereas design alters it. I have a great example of this. One of the most popular books in Silicon Valley today is by Nir Eyal, and it's called Hooked. The byline is How to Build Habit-Forming Products, the subtitle. And in the book, it tells you how we can build products so that we can create addicts. Or as we call them, users, right? Because there's only two industries in the world that call the people who use their products users. One is us, and the other are drug dealers. So in this type of design, we're talking about ethnographic design. We're studying the other as if it was a lab rat. And we're trying to understand how we can addict it so that it uses our products. Because the more it uses our products, the more value we gain. That's the farming bit. I would call this evil. Or, as the book's website calls it, the book everyone in Silicon Valley is talking about. So this is what exists today in mainstream technology. That's how we design mainstream technologies today. What are the alternatives? Well, we have free and open source, right to the rescue. Well, how is free and open source designed today? Well, in free and open source, we say, hey, look, we're protecting your future, we're protecting your freedoms, and we're protecting democracy, and we're creating these tools that you own. Isn't this great? But what about the immediate experience? What about how easy they are to use, how convenient they are to use? Well, pull requests are welcome, right? This is a problem. Because if there are those of you in the audience who don't even know what a pull request is, you understand the problem. It is not in any way accessible to people who want to use technology as an everyday thing. Not stupid people, just people who want to use technology and not think about how it works necessarily, to make it work for them, not to tinker with it, not enthusiasts. So the cost is convenience. We can do better. We can do better than what I call trickle-down technology. This is the problem with free and open source. We think that as enthusiasts, as people who love tinkering and playing with technology for the sake of it, if we design things for ourselves, that they will magically somehow trickle down to become usable products for everyone else. And this simply doesn't happen. Just like trickle-down economics, it's a myth. Trickle-down technology is a myth that we need to move beyond in the free and open source world. Beyond to what? To what I would call ethical design. These two things should not be dichotomies. Why don't we design beautiful products that empower people? People, not consumers. People, not users. People. That thing that we all are first before the others. And protect their freedom. Protect democracy itself. Well, what's the cost? There's always a cost. Perhaps it's money that they pay us. Perhaps if we're adding to the commons, we can pay for it through the commons because we are maintaining the health of the commons. And ethical design is not hard. You can think of it as an analogy, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very base, we start with respecting human rights when we're designing, not with the corner radius of our panels. So we build things that are private, secure, accessible, and sustainable. We've done that. Let's move beyond to make sure that they're functional and convenient and that people can use them. Let's not stop there. Let's go one step more and build things that are delightful, that are beautiful experiences. Because our experiences matter. They're all we have in life. And then we die. So the quality of those experiences, whether they're with people or with things, is important. It is arrogant, sometimes as we do in the free and open source world, to say, it doesn't matter because we're protecting these other things. So it all really, the 3 R's of ethical design, it all really comes down to 1 R. Respect. About respecting the human. And that's where we fail in mainstream technology. We fail at the very, very beginning because we're building products that don't respect human rights. And when we do that, we're not building tools for people. We're building products on the backs of people. And that's how most mainstream technologies today are built. You might say that that is the new alphabet of our lives. Too soon? So if we're going to fix this, we have to move beyond the cloud. The cloud, the web, is not the answer. It is the problem because it's centralized. It's centralized client-server. We need to move beyond that. You might say, Aral, what, the web is centralized? No, the web is decentralized, right? Everyone can have a website. That's kind of how it began, right? But because it's client-server, we still had centers. And if there are economies of scale, those centers will scale vertically, and they will coalesce until they become the monopolies that we know today. So we need a new topology. This one is broken. A topology without privileged centers. Because privilege is the problem. It is what leads to inequality. It is what perpetuates inequality. We need a topology that's egalitarian. And that is a decentralized topology. It sounds like the topic of an academic paper. It's actually very simple. Where Facebook says to you, if you want to share your photo with your friend, you must first share it with us so that we can run facial recognition on it, try to understand more about, your relationship with your friend, etc., etc., etc. All these things that we do very simply because it's our business model to do so. Where Facebook says that, with our alternatives, with independent technologies, we can say, if you want to share your photo with your friend, share your photo with your friend directly, with no man in the middle. And that's what independent technology is. It's not rocket science. And I'm not just talking about this. This isn't just theory. I'm trying to put my keystrokes where my mouth is. And I've been trying to do that with a tiny social enterprise in the UK. It's 3 of us, 3 people. That's Jo. She runs the Everyday. That's Laura. She's also my partner. And she helps with the design of the website and design in general, the visual aspects of the design more so. And there's me in the middle. I'm not very photogenic. And I work on the app, the platform that we're building. So I'm the primary developer on this thing. It's called Heartbeat. And I've been working on it for about 6-8 months now on developing it and designing it, which I see as the same thing. One person standing on the shoulders of giants, of everyone who has shared all of their code and their knowledge before me. But one person can make a difference in what we're doing. If somebody tells you from Silicon Valley, either you do things our way, or you are against innovation, or you're against job creation, tell them bullshit. Because that is exactly what it is. There is no technical infeasibility for us to do things differently. There's every business case and short-term gain in doing it the way that we do it today. So I just released the pre-alpha of Heartbeat. It's a messaging application so that you can share the things that matter to you with the people that you care about and no one else. And I released the pre-alpha last week. It's been live for 1 week. And I've never shown the user interface publicly. And I'm very proud of the user interface. It's very early days, but I'm very proud of it. And you're going to be the first audience that sees the user interface. And so to do that, I'm going to ask all of you to close your eyes. Please do it. And I would like you to keep your eyes closed for the remainder of this demonstration.
Heartbeat. Heartbeat is loading. Window. Load pick a handle to use on Ind.ie, or enter your existing one. A-R-A-L. Checking if account. Aral. Sorry, the handle Aral is not available. Please try a different handle. Balkan. The handle Aral Balkan is available. Would you like to sign up as Ind.ie/Aral-Balkan? Press enter for yes. Balkan. Handle accepted. Transitioning to second step.
Full name.
Edit text.
A short, 1 sentence bio.
Edit text. Done. Default button. Press done. The default. But creating account. Interact with dialog. 4. Window. Heartbeat.
Please enter your invitation code.
Edit text. Paste. Submit. Default. Button. Closing dialog. Creating account. Heartbeat. Heartbeat. Window. Main navigation. Tab bar. Interact with main navigation. Tab bar. 5 items. Everyone on Ind.ie. Tab 1 of 5. Your public posts selected. Tab 2 of 5. All friends. Tab 3 of 5. Conversations. Tab 4 of 5. Private posts. Tab 5 of 5. Notification center. New friend request. Stefan Ubink. Accept button. Press accept. Notification center. Stefan Ubink is now your friend. Close button. Press heartbeat. Heartbeat window. Your public posts selected. Edit text. Interact with edit text. Capital E L L T E E E comma right sin M space E T N E S E I R L T U P R T space code right param. Hello there everyone. I'm just testing the accessibility support smiley. Stop interacting with edit text. Send button. Press send button.
Please open your eyes. I'm very proud of what... Thank you. Of what we've been able to achieve with the user interface. I didn't start with that because the user interface is ugly. Quite the opposite. I like to think it is rather beautiful. But we have to start thinking beyond ourselves in terms of creating things that anyone can use. I get a lot of criticism because we started this project, even though it's a free and open source project, on Apple's platforms, on Mac OS X. And people say, why didn't you start on Linux? Why didn't you start on this other platform? And if you can show me another platform that has this level of accessibility support, I would have started it on there. Because sometimes when I hear these questions, what I hear is, why didn't you build it for a larger group of able-bodied people? Or why didn't you build it just for a group of enthusiasts? Why didn't you build us a new toy? We have enough toys, guys. We really do. Middle-aged white guys with technical knowledge, none of these things are issues for us. We can solve them with the tools that we have. This is a greater issue that affects society. And we have to start considering that. It's not just about us and building new toys for ourselves. And that's what you saw initially, the public message that we sent. That's just one part of it. You have entirely private messages that are just synchronized among your own devices. Nobody else gets to see those, so you can store things there. It's all this is pre-alpha, very, very early. You have conversations, private conversations. Not like on Facebook, where Facebook is listening to all of your private conversations. These go directly between your device and the device of the person you're talking to. We have a very primitive group chat where all of your friends can talk, but again, privately for all of your friends. And then you have public posts. It's not about becoming hermits. If you want to put things out there publicly, then you can. And those posts are all aggregated, so you can see everyone else's public posts. But you, crucially, get to make the decision of what is private for yourself alone and what you want to share. And sneakily, what I've done is when you post these public posts, you can access them from anywhere that has a web browser because you are actually building your own website, even though you might not know it, your own independent web presence. And if you want to get involved with this, or if you don't trust the fact that it's private, all of the source code, all of what makes it possible is out there. You can take it, you can look through it. If you have technical knowledge, you can get involved, and you can help make it better. It is all in the commons. We're finalizing the licenses, but we want to put it so that it's entirely within the commons. I want to do this. If you have issues, report the issues, get involved. Let's make it better. Get involved on the forums. Let's talk about directions where we can take this. So that's Heartbeat. 8 months or so of my life, but one person building a tool that does things differently. with almost no funding. I sold a flat in order to do this, right? It was a family flat. We're not rich. It was a cooperative that my parents paid into for 30 years. That's how we got started. And then we did a round of crowdfunding, and 1,500 people supported us. And that's where it's gotten us to where we are. But the total amount of money that we have used as 3 people as an enterprise would not make up the salary of one high-level engineer at a Silicon Valley company. So if anyone tells you it's impossible, or it's impractical, or it's infeasible, tell them bullshit for me, please. If you want to learn more about the kind of technologies we can build, we have a manifesto. Read it. Get involved. Tell me what you think. We need to move beyond the world that we're creating, not for altruistic reasons. I'm not doing this because I'm altruistic. I'm doing this because it's in my selfish needs to create a world where I have human rights and I live in a democracy. This is not altruism. But we need to move beyond centralization. Centralization of power, centralization of control. We cannot do this with venture capital and the system of venture capital that we have. Because if we do, the moment you take venture capital, what you're selling to the investor is all of the people that will be using your platform in the future. That's what they're investing in. Investors invest in the exit, not the business. That's venture capital. We need to move beyond that. We need to move beyond the Silicon Valley model. These are not heroes. Let's stop worshiping them as heroes. We need to move beyond colonialism in the way that we design and make things. We need to make our organizations diverse so that by designing for ourselves, we design for a diverse audience. That is the opposite of ethnographic design. We need to move beyond privilege because that is at the heart of the issue. We need to move beyond inequality. And it all comes down to one thing. We need to move beyond bullshit. Because this is what we've done, people. We've taken a seed, a bullshit seed, and we've planted it. And it's grown into a tree, and that's a bullshit tree. And we've climbed up into the branches, and now we're wondering why the fruit tastes like bullshit. And there's a reason for that. Because bullshit fruit is the only type of fruit you get from a bullshit tree. Now, some of us who benefit from this system think that if we decorate the tree, it will change the taste of the fruit. But it doesn't. Some of us who care about these issues feel that if we can just prune some of the branches, it will change the nature of the tree. But it doesn't. So here's what I think we should do. I think some of us, not all of us, some of us have to climb down from the bullshit tree. And we need to take a few steps to the side and plant a new seed. A seed based on reason and equality and sustainability. And then we will get a very different type of tree. We won't need to decorate it because built on these principles, it will already be beautiful. And the fruit that we get from it will be diverse. But we can't stop here. This is crucial. We now need to build a bridge between our tree and the bullshit tree. A convenient bridge so that others can join us, so that it's accessible to people who are still on the bullshit tree. Because that is the bridge between the centralized world of old and the decentralized world that we need to move to if we want a future, a sustainable future for our species. A future built on reason, on equality, on human rights, and on democracy. That is the future that I want to live in. That is the future that we deserve. That is the future that I challenge us to build. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that was exciting. Thank you. But what an energizing start. I have some questions. Before that, I would like to start by checking, parsing maybe two things that you mentioned that went where I think we could benefit just from a little bit of translation. One is accessibility.
The bullshit tree? Is that
No, that was very clear.
Okay.
Accessibility features. So
Yes.
what we heard is the user experience of, for instance, a blind user.
Yes, it's the user experience of anyone who's using a screen reader. That is just one tool for addressing a certain spectrum of disabilities. There are others. There are people who use computers with a single switch. They have one switch. And if they want to click on something, it scans across, and they have to stop it. And it scans down, and they have to stop it. And then they say, OK, click here, and then they go on. So what you didn't see, or maybe you saw, but you didn't actually see that it was happening, when in the profile picture, when you were choosing a profile picture, initially it came out with your default profile picture from the computer that you're using, so your account picture. So if you're using it with a switch, and if you've already set your profile picture, then maybe you will just leave it. Because to change that, what you saw me doing easily with the mouse could take a minute for someone who uses a switch control. Let's say you wanted to change it. You want to upload a new one. If you saw, after you selected the picture, it kind of zoomed in on the face. I don't know if anyone noticed that. So I'm using facial recognition there, not to spy on you. That's all on your computer. But facial recognition to find out where your face is so I can frame that photo for you as well as I can. So that, again, if you're using it with a switch, it might save you a few minutes of your life. Because we don't know how many minutes we have, right, going forward. So that's where accessibility comes in. Accessibility is not for people with disabilities. It is for all of us. It is usability where we take into consideration a wider audience. But all of these things that we're building means that if you want to get back to talking to your children faster, that's going to happen. If you're out in, bright daylight and you can't see the screen as well, then the fact that there's enough contrast is going to help you as well. As we start to get older, perhaps some of these things are going to start to help us. So it's not about people with disabilities. It's about respecting, again, comes back to respecting
and
human
already
beings
here, I'm like,
and their
why
experiences.
isn't everybody doing this already? But there, of course...
Well, I think, privilege takes many forms. And the privilege of having an able body is one of those forms.
I'm going to let you guys ask questions. I would especially like to hear from the gentlemen who were tutting at the criticism of the open source movement. But I'll just ask another question so you can mentally prepare, since many of us are from the Nordic countries and find these kinds of things terrifying. So very briefly,
they are
you
very
said
vocal,
investors invest in the exit.
Yes.
Just for people who are not familiar with this, let's see
Not
if
all investors, but venture capitalists.
Venture capitalists. So let's see if I can translate this with my non-expert words, and then you can tell me if it was right.
Yeah.
So basically, venture capitalists go in early and put in money into
They take
startups.
a huge amount of risk.
Exactly.
And maybe they invest in 10 companies.
Yeah.
And they know that 9 of these startups are going to fail. So the one that they've invested $5 million in has to become $1 billion success.
And the exit in this context means
is the sale of
when you
that
sell
company.
it, for instance, your initial public offering or something like
Yeah,
this.
there are two ways. It's either an initial public offering, you sell it to all of us as
The
shareholders,
market, so to speak,
yeah,
yes.
Or you sell it to another company. And the other companies that, well, there's only one business model really that scales that quickly today that we know. And it is the business of farming people, of selling us. Not selling us a product, but selling us to customers.
So the question here is to invest in an exit is to invest in a company that becomes potentially valuable very, very fast, rather than investing in a sustainable business model over time.
There are means in which we can do that. We can invest in a business so that you get returns as the business or the organization is successful, and it can grow organically, and you can get higher returns from that. This is not rocket science. Again, we can invest in share of revenue, etc.
Let's take some audience questions
Yeah.
at this point. I'm realizing we're going to have to do that move very fast because
Sure.
time is
Are we
running
out of
along.
time? I'm here all week, by the way, if you want to come and talk to me.
I have like 1 million questions, but you may have some also. Either about the product, the specific technology, or about the overall analysis. Do you have any?
Everyone's being very coy. It's okay. Don't be coy.
Right here. Can we have a microphone right here? Yes. Please raise your hand again so they can see you. Yes, so would you pass down the mic? Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Johan Sävholm. Thank you
Hi,
for a very good speech. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So how do you solve the problem of two devices not being online at the same time?
Right, thank you. That's a good question. Right now, that is a problem. Two devices have to be online at the same time in order to synchronize. Going forward, what I want to do, because right now we also have a centralized bit, which is called Waystone, and that acts like a pub that you go to and you meet your friends, and once you've met them, you join your devices together. What I want to do is iterate on this to remove Waystone from the equation completely, and instead use things like the Interplanetary File System, which sounds awesome, doesn't it? IPFS, which uses a blockchain. And using that, we can encrypt, for example, your messages, put it on a blockchain, and then when the other device comes online, you might be offline, but it can look in the blockchain for your encrypted message, take it from there. So there's a lot that we can do, and that is going to be the architecture of the next web. So look at something like IPFS, or look at what they're doing with Ethereum. That's what the next web is going to look like. The next web will be decentralized. It will be peer-to-peer in its nature. We're taking small steps to get there. I'm trying to be practical and pragmatic, given the resources that I have, which is mostly me and my two wonderful colleagues.
I don't know if you saw, but what happened just now in the room was that everybody who actually understood what Aral just said did this. They put their thinking face on. I saw like 7 people at the same time when you started answering go, oh, is this going wrong? So if you figured it out, please talk to Aral after the talk. Okay, I'm going to ask the last question. I'm going to ask for a brief answer. It's 2 questions, and they're enormous, so there's a little challenge here.
Yes.
Who should act next? If we're interested, let's put the specific product aside and just think about ethical design as a whole. Who should act now? And how do we demand or support ethical design, all of us?
Well, I think who should act? All of us. It's in all of our interests to do this. Please, like I said, don't see this as something that you're doing for others. We have to understand that if we're being selfish even, we have to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean grabbing the next source of glucose and the next hit of dopamine. That's the sort of lemming-like behavior that's going to lead us off the edge of the cliff before we even realize it. So everyone can start doing things now for yourselves. Not everyone has the luxury of stopping to, of leaving a company whose business model might be to spy on people and to farm people. But you can try and make changes where you are. We're trying to build alternatives where, people who want to do this can work. If you are privileged enough, let's say you were working in this industry, and you decide that maybe you don't agree with how your company is making money or how you're making money, and you do have the luxury of starting something up yourself, maybe take that. Build things that empower people. It's up to all of us. Those without technical knowledge, maybe start looking at what alternatives there are, or at least just starting to educate yourself about these things. But we can't expect that, and that's a problem as well. We can't expect people to get all of this technical knowledge and learn our difficult tools. We have to make tools that are very simple for people to use, convenient. Unless we can compete on convenience with the people farmers, we're not going to win this battle. And it feels like educating regulators would also be important. Well, yes. Right? I mean, you have a vote. You have more than a vote in some of your... And we have a huge luxury that we live in. So, here you have a democracy that is probably more functional than most. Use it. Use the power that you have as a citizen to make a change. These are all important. Like I said, this is not a technological issue. No matter how many lines of code we write, we're not going to fix this unless we fix the social issues and the legislative issues around it first. And I forgot your second question. I think you answered it just now. All right. Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, Aral Balkan. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have practical information.